Okay, now I'm going to share. Oh, there it is. Okay. Are we still good?
We're good.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, let's start. So first of all, I'm just going to ask a question. Have any of you heard of the Sustainable Development Goals? If so, where?
Well, I have, obviously. You may have heard the term SDGs, and you go, what?
Okay, so I'm going to confess that I wasn't familiar with these until a year ago. When I was working on the posters for the poster contest for the convention in Dublin. And one of the requirements in the initial submission to be selected for the poster contest was to talk about which sustainable development goals your project related to. And I said, oh, what are those?
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked them up and then I, figured it out. So that was my first introduction and I found it very interesting. And then as we were at the convention in Dublin, they were referred to not infrequently, I would say several times. I believe each of the federations in their presentations about their federations talked about which sustainable development goals they were working on. So it became interesting. And then in a couple, in the most recent workshop we had with Sharon Fisher, she referred to it. And so I thought it would be good to go into a little bit more detail. So now my thing isn't, I can't do it. There we go. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to just kind of a little bit of history, what they are, where they came from. There are 17 sustainable development goals. So we're going to talk about what they are very briefly. I'm going to talk about the role of Sir Optimist. Why are we talking about it? And then metrics and measurement. How do we know we're making progress? And then I'll leave you with some additional resources in case you want to do some research on your own. So we're going to start with a little history. Interestingly, the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by the United Nations in 2015, but the build up to that started as early as 1962. So in 1962, a book was written about the impact of everyday things that we do on the environment. And that was kind of the genesis of really starting to talk about our impact on the environment by what we do, what we consume. And it kind of took off from there. And then it became over the years, well, actually in 1969, there was a huge oil spill off the coast of California down in the South. Anybody remembers that? And then that, because that was so massive and became so known throughout the world, more people globally started to get together and say, we need to do something, protect the environment. And it made its way to the United Nations eventually. And they adopted these goals. So really what the Sustainable Development Goals are is this universal agenda that requires everyone throughout the world to participate in order to achieve the goals. So while it started initially as kind of sustaining the globe, if you will, it's become something much bigger. It's become not just about the environment, but also people and social agendas and economies and all those kind of things. So as we get into them, that will begin to make more sense. So here briefly is just a list of the 17 goals. And you can see that some are more descriptive than others, and they're very, very high level. So no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, reduced inequality, not none, just reduced, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and then creating partnerships to meet the goals. So we're going to go into these in a little bit more depth, but not a lot. They're all very interconnected and independent, as you can see. And as we go into more detail, you'll see even more clearly that, you know, you're not going to make progress in one without making progress in the other. If we want truly, you know, no poverty, reduced inequality, gender equality, those things definitely work together. That's why the symbol of the Sustainable Development Goals is a circle. I just made that up, but it makes sense to me. So here we're going to go just through them quickly in slightly more definition. So number one, no poverty. And the goal here is to eradicate poverty for all people everywhere. And this is measured as people living on less than $1.25 a day. The second one is zero hunger, which the goal is to end hunger and ensure access by all people to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food all year round. It's kind of self-explanatory. Good health and well-being, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being at all ages. You know, I want to go back to this because I think in Sharon's workshop a couple of weeks ago, the topic came up about caring for elders just as much as caring for the generation behind us, which I think was interesting. Quality education, ensuring inclusive and quality education for all and promoting lifelong learning. And as we know from like convention from 2 years ago, the online essay convention when Malala came, you know, we know that many countries don't even support education for girls. Gender equality, ending all forms of discrimination and eliminating all forms of violence against women and girls everywhere. Somebody's at my door. Clean water and sanitation, achieve universal and equitable access to safe, affordable drinking water and adequate sanitation and hygiene for all. And we know this is a problem in our country. I can only imagine in less developed countries than ours. Affordable and clean energy, ensure universal access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Decent work and economic growth, promoting inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure, to build resilient infrastructure, promote sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. You know, we know every time we see news of a major natural disaster, especially outside of this country, how much damage is done to the infrastructure because it's just not strong enough. Reduced inequalities, empower and promote social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, or other status. Sustainable cities and communities, making cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Responsible consumption and production, ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns. Climate action, strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters in all countries. Life below water, conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources. Does anyone follow the Monterey Bay Aquarium? When I used to live there, but I still follow it. They do a lot about, you know, more than just being a attraction for visitors, just tons and tons of research on preserving ocean life. So very fascinating. Life on land, managing forests, combating desertification, halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. Peace, justice, and strong institutions provide peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development and provide access to justice for all. And then partnerships for the goals, revitalizing the global partnership for sustainable development so that we all work together. So I think if you think of all these, they sound very lofty. You know, we think of the SIA goal of reaching 500,000 women and girls as sounding lofty. And then we get to this level, it's kind of like, you know, world peace, right? Sounds almost unachievable. And it is a lot. I mean, these are obviously very, very lofty when we think of the world as a whole. So where do we fit in? So you've seen the goals, you know, I know you don't have them memorized. I don't either. But clearly, several of them touch on the following things: eliminating gender-based violence, eradicating human trafficking, ensuring access to sexual and reproductive health care, expanding economic opportunities for women, increasing access to water and sanitation, adopting legislation and policies that promote gender equality. So the SDGs cannot be achieved unless we have women and girls at the table. So I'm going to turn it over to Governor Charlie to go through this portion of the presentation.
Okay. One thing I want you to think about as we're going through this is what Judi touched on is our 2021-2031 big goal, and that's investing in the dreams of 500,000 women and girls through access to education. It's a big, bodacious goal, but it makes even more sense when you see what the SDGs are and our role in helping the whole globe meet them. And so it seems that what's interesting is, Judi pointed this out to me, I hadn't even picked up on it, but all the goals that we impact are in the shade of red. Seroptimus International in the Americas is working on 5 of the Sustainable Development Goals, and under those Sustainable Development Goals, there are 12 targets that we're trying to meet. We aren't going to get into all the details of the targets tonight because, I mean, you could spend probably a whole year of academic classes learning all this stuff, but they're number 1, because they tend to refer to them by number. Number 1, which is no poverty. Number 4, quality education. 5, gender equality. 8, decent work and economic growth. And 10, reduced inequalities. These are the goals that the Dreams programs of Seroptimus International in the Americas directly impact. Other Seroptimus federations focus on some of the other goals, particularly that pertain to the environment. I know in Africa and Europe especially, they're doing a lot with the environment. And so over the next few slides, we'll review how the SIA Dream programs are impacting these 5 Sustainable Development Goals. And so goal number 1, no poverty, you'll see a list and you'll see lots of statistics, and it kind of then the light bulbs go on that, okay, this is why we're asked to fill out reports on our Live Your Dream and our Dream It Be It and our big goal or our accelerator projects, is because they're using this data to go back and submit reports to the UN, because every organization that is working within the UN at the table is submitting their data, because it's all data driven, because that's how we can show that we're making progress. And so I'm not going to read everything, but I'm going to just point out a couple. On the Live Your Dream Awards, recipients reported 70% of the recipients reported living in poverty on their application, and with just under 80% reporting that their expenses exceed their income every month. But then the outcome is 81% of the Live Your Dream recipients who've completed their education show an increase in their standard of living. So they're fighting that, they're moving above the poverty line, or making the right direction, moving in the right direction. And with Dream It Be It, 88% of the girls participating feel more confident about their future and success, and 87% feel more prepared to pursue their future career goals. And so that's the work we're doing. We're impacting these young ladies and these the Live Your Dream recipients to start moving getting that forward motion and moving out of the poverty area. And 88% of the girls participating in Dream It Be It felt they created goals that will help achievable goals for their future. Moving on to goal number 4, quality education. You can see that that's the right one. Okay, I was like, I think my slides got mixed up. Each year we reach at least 1,800 women through the Live Your Dream program, and have awarded more than 2.7 million to support their education and career goals. And with the Dream It Be It, we've impacted 94,000, and we keep every year these numbers increase. And we are working in 11 developing countries. So, you know, in the United States, we tend to not think of ourselves in, you know, with that $1.25 that we're trying to eliminate poverty. There are countries in our federation where these issues are even more deeply felt. And so we're helping also support the educational goals of women in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, the Philippines, and Venezuela. So we're not just impacting people in our community, we're impacting on a more global scale. Moving on to number 5, again, we're impacting more than 1,800, this is gender equality, 1,800 women who received the Live Your Dream Award. 93% of those stated that they reported an increase in self-esteem. Well, self-esteem will help in battling other issues that come with gender equality, where they're standing up and they're asserting their rights to move forward. And the same thing goes with the Dream It Be It girls. They're feeling more confident about their future success. They're not being pigeonholed because they're a girl. They are seeing that they have lots of opportunities out there. And so moving the needle towards more gender equality. And the 4th goal is number 8, decent work and economic growth. And you'll see how Judi had mentioned these are all kind of interrelated. So the statistics that are gathered, or a lot of the statistics are the same because they all are impacting each one of these goals. And on this one, again, 81% of the Live Your Dream Award recipients completed their education and saw an increase in their standard of living. And 88% of the girls participating felt confident about their future success. And they also 86% felt that they know women who want to support their professional aspirations. That's what we're doing as Seroptimists. They know they've got other women out there that are rooting for them to succeed and building their decent work and economic. And then the road to inequalities. Again, a lot of these are the same statistics. So we kind of already gone through there, but you can see how they will impact by giving them the education. They're able to go out and improve their standard of living, and they're able to feel more confident about themselves, and then trying to reduce the inequalities that they feel in their lives. And so those are the areas that we're working on as Seroptimists. And am I continuing, Judi, or are you taking over?
I can take over.
Okay.
You're doing great if you want to continue. I'll come back to you.
I'll let you take over.
So, you know, that was a lot of metrics from our measurement from our dream programs for SIA. So kind of the bigger question is, how are all of these 70 goals measured? And how do we know if we're making progress? So I will say among the 17 goals, there are 169 specific targets. So they get more specific than just no poverty. So for example, one of the targets is specific to that, you know, eliminate anyone that is living on less than $1.25 a day. That's one specific target. A second specific target is to have no one below the poverty line as defined in their respective nations or regions or communities. So that gets to be a little bit more specific. So of the 17, each one has a different number of targets that are measurable. And so there are, anyone, countries, global organizations, nonprofit organizations, including Seroptimus, is able to submit any progress on the Sustainable Development Goals through a variety of mechanisms. So there are portals, there are organizations that specialize in collecting information, and the United Nations teams compile and analyze the data and annually provide a global overview of the progress. As you can imagine, we're halfway through. So we're originated in 2015, and they're 15-year goals. So we're about halfway through. And I'm not going to report the specific data, but that's something you can research and look into. But obviously, I don't think any of us feel like we're anywhere near like meeting any of these goals. And certainly COVID was a big setback for many of these goals during the pandemic. The issues were heightened even more, inequalities and poverty became even more transparent, and who was able to successfully navigate life through the pandemic and who wasn't. So it's really unfortunate. But there are online platforms where we can look at the data and track progress. And I'm going to show a quick video, and I hope this works, where you can just see a little bit about some of these measurement tools. Somebody yell if the sound isn't working or something.
No sound.
Their efforts to end poverty.
No sound?
How much
Now.
progress made towards achieving affordable and clean energy?
Can you hear it now?
How can we
Can hear it
respond
now.
Okay.
to the economic costs of climate change? Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, established by the United Nations in 2015, offer a framework of 17 global goals which aim to end poverty, protect the environment, and ensure prosperity for all by 2030. 2023 marks the midpoint for achieving these goals. The World Bank's Atlas of Sustainable Development Goals presents interactive storytelling and data visualizations to describe progress towards each of the 17 SDGs. The first SDG calls for an end to extreme poverty in all its forms everywhere. That is also one of the World Bank's goals. The good news is, since 1990, the world has made extraordinary progress in reducing extreme poverty. You can see this in the Atlas. The number of extreme poor declined from about 2 billion people in 1990 to fewer than 700 million in 2019. COVID-19, however, eroded progress. In 2020, another 70 million people fell into extreme poverty. Current projections suggest that 574 million people, 7% of the global population, will still be living in extreme poverty by 2030. You can explore these issues and more in the Atlas. Many of the stories highlight the impact of climate change on the SDGs, including on gender equality and transportation. The Atlas aims to be a reservoir of knowledge about the SDGs for policymakers, academics, journalists, and the public at large. We follow an open data, open code, open knowledge approach. In this spirit, anyone can download all its data, code, and visualizations. Check out the SDG Atlas stories with interactive maps and visuals. It can help us understand where we stand in our efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay. No, that's not what I want. Stop.
It can be done.
Where am I? It can be done. Okay. So this is just final slide, some additional resources if you're interested. These are hyperlinks, so I will send this out, but essentially Seroptimist International has a white paper that talks about the Sustainable Development Goals and how Seroptimist fits in. The United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs is somewhat the owner of these, so that's a good resource as well. And then Seroptimist International of the Americas, SIA, has a blog, which is really where all of that data came from that we showed earlier, which is interesting to look at. So it just makes it very clear that this is important to Seroptimists, both our federation and the larger global Seroptimist International, very much at the forefront of a lot of the advocacy work and the work at the United Nations. So as we talk about sharing data, collecting data, and the importance of data, I'm just trying to build this picture over the course of the year about why that really matters, and why, 500,000 is a significant enough number. It doesn't seem like it when you're talking about 770 million people across the world living in poverty, but we're making an impact on 500,000, which is not insubstantial. So that's kind of it for formal presentation. Any questions or anything anyone wants to ask or comment?
I'm just overwhelmed. I mean, it's so much.
Yeah.
You feel helpless. You don't, I mean, I know what we're doing, but when you see the rest of that, it's just, oh, well, first of all, it's heartbreaking. And it's just, I don't know, you just can only do so much. The people that are so, I remember the Africa talk in Dublin, Charlie, and what they were doing. And it was so impressive. And I don't know. I don't know how to put it in words, but this was really interesting and sad at the same time.
It is. I
Wow.
mean, I guess my take on it is, it's big stuff, right? I mean, it's
Big stuff.
literally world peace without calling it that. But yeah, we can do what we can do, and we can see that we're at least having an impact, however small, in the scheme of things. It's at least nice to know, and it kind of begin to see why the dream programs are what they are, and how this focus that we've had over the last, decade, more general Seroptimist focus, why all the scattered things have less direct impact on these goals. I agree. I mean, it's kind of, and the other thing I think of is, and Charlie and I have talked about this, is just, it is good to look at the bigger picture, even if it is overwhelming. It makes the day-to-day stuff we're dealing with our clubs seem so silly.
Yes.
Significant. And we all know that conceptually.
Yeah.
But just continuing to kind of spread that, like, hey, why are we fighting over a word in our bylaws when we have so much more we could be focused on? And people are people, and I get it, and people are going to disagree.
Well, it's just like, we make progress in one area and then a war breaks out. And, we've got all the, not just our politics, good grief, but everybody else's, across the world. It seems like you make, 10 steps forward, 5 steps back. And there's so much we can't do anything about, that I guess we just have to pick up the pieces where we can and provide support. And just one woman at a time, huh?
Well, and that's why my daughter did 6 weeks. She volunteered at an orphanage in Ghana, Africa, back in college, and she really gave me a whole new perspective, because she said, until you have clean water, she got deathly ill from brushing her teeth with the native water. She didn't use her water packet that night. And not pretty. My husband was ready to send in the U.S. SEALs to get her out. It was bad. Anyway, but she said, until you have clean water, shelter, and food, all the other stuff is fluff. Kids can't learn unless, they have those essentials.
Right.
But that's why, though, in America, most people at least have the bare minimum of them. And that's why the education piece in the United States, at least, is very important. In Africa, they've got so many other needs of a developing nation. The clean water, I mean, like giving the jerry cans to the women, which actually frees up their day because they can carry more water. You know, they have to walk 5 miles to the well and carry the water back, where they were spending their entire day just going back and forth, where now they can do it in 1 or 2 trips. You know, those little things that just seem, in our world, seem like, you know, oh, that's silly, but it's not in the world. And it's really impacting their lives.
They don't have access to the resources that we do either. I mean, it's tough.
You know,
But
it's
that's why we also
interesting.
have different focuses.
Yeah, it was interesting. Last year, I was able to review and evaluate the club grant proposals. And you know, when you do that, you're not allowed to look at any in your own region. So I got, I had a few from like the Philippines, couple of countries in South America, I don't remember which ones. And what they're looking for in terms of club grants, so you know, $2,500, $3,000 at the most coming from SIA, and what they want to use it for versus like what we want to use it for is also a little bit humbling. And it is these types of things. It is, you know, ways to produce, you know, drinkable water for their kids. I mean, it's a good exercise to just kind of ground ourselves, right? And it's not to say we certainly have a lot of issues in this country. I mean, you know, if we're trying to reduce inequality, we can look at ourselves, that's for sure. Kind of no debate there, but yeah, I mean, Sir Optimist is there. You know,
I'm at the table.
Kind of surprised that I'm kind of surprised this hadn't been pushed out to us a little bit more, but it is now. So
Did you just get all this? Is it something new?
No, it's Seroptimus has been at the table for a very long time, but I think Seroptimus internationally, America's kind of got away from promoting the whole UN thing. It's more coming from SI.
Yeah.
And other federations, it's a big part of what they do is the whole United Nations thing. And I think we're starting to see a swing towards more acknowledgement of the work we're doing in the UN.
Yeah, I agree.
We aren't the best kept secret in the UN. They know who we are.
Yeah. That's good.
It is good. And it's good for us to know we have that connection, and they do look at our data, and
do you think we'll have any presentations on this in Washington in July? Will that be
a good question? I don't know. I don't know.
I would hope, but again, it hasn't been a big push in SIA, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, it was interesting because when Stephanie did her, you know, we had the breakout workshops for each of the federations, and then they had like a quick 15 minutes with everybody, right? And she touched on these, you know, the direct ones that SIA is impacting, and it's the first time I've seen it tied to SIA that directly. And I don't know if that's because it was an international convention or if it will be at the forefront. Very interesting to see if it comes up just the SIA convention.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I'm fascinated by it. It's, you know, there's a whole structure out there that we're unaware of in terms of these goals, and you know, one of the things we learned at convention is every country has a plan. Doesn't mean they're doing the plan, but every country has a plan and goal, you know, specific toward these goals. And I think it gives us the opportunity to kind of ask more questions, even locally, about, you know, what are we doing? And like I said, for me, it's just kind of grounding, but nice to see that there are, at least globally, there are organizations working on this, people taking it very seriously, lots of data collection, and whether it's evident that there's progress. I'm not sure there is very evident, but maybe in
COVID.
some places more than others. I don't know.
Yeah.
And amazing, like how badly COVID impacted things was.
Yeah, and we're going to feel that for a while in so many areas too.
And the other thing is just like the changing regime in politics. And I don't want to talk politics. And it doesn't matter where I land politically, but you have these extreme, one of the things that came out of this kind of push from the early 60s in terms of talking about the environment was the Paris Climate Accord, which, we were in and they were out and now we're back in. So that's purely political. And we're just one country, right? We know that other countries are also having these kind of extreme regime changes, which absolutely makes an impact on how progress is made. If collectively as a country you can't buy into the need to kind of protect the environment, then how are you going to possibly make progress toward any of those goals? So.
I just heard a guy on the news last night. He was saying that we talk about how far we're going with climate change, and he said, but we're actually producing more carbon now than we have been in the last 10 years. He said, so we're saying we're making progress, but the other part's going up. He said, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
They're not looking at the right stuff. I thought, well, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have at least 3 finance people here today. I was on a call with our investment committee yesterday and our investment advisors. And then we were talking about, these investments in companies that, ESG. So organizations that are trying to kind of move the needle, and are those good investments? And, it's good to have a strategy that says we're only going to invest in organizations that are taking this seriously. And at the same time, you have this need to have some sort of reasonable investment return. So your ideals can be very lofty, but the reality is, you're still going to put your money. If you have a pension fund that is expected to generate a certain return, you can't just do this, right? And so the new look on it is investing in these companies that are trying to get that balance right. It's just kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like you can say you want to do that, but it's just like you can say, and even in this state, we're going to do away with, fossil fuel and we're all going to have electric cars, but there's a whole infrastructure that has to go with that. And, it's not attainable for some people. So
yeah, right.
I digress.
Okay.
But, some of these I look at and think, and I know it's not naive because I know it's not as simple as this, but it's wishful thinking. I mean, I look at these 17 goals. I'm like, say, how can you argue with these? How can you argue that achieving these goals would not be good for everyone? And yet, of course, there are people and countries and factions that don't buy into it. They like inequality. They preach inequality, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think we all collectively agree the more women at the table, the better.
Absolutely. That's true.
So
well, thanks you guys. This was really interesting. I wish more people would do this. It's so frustrating, Julie. We were just talking about how frustrated we are with our club that, they ask all these questions, and if they just come to some of these, they would get so much information. Like next week you're doing Live Your Dream and Dream It Be It. Is that right?
in January.
Oh, that's January. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know,
We don't
Julie.
have any more in December.
You got to force them, Julie, to do it in January. Tell them it's their homework. Because the new people, we talk about all this stuff, but they don't know about what's behind it and what drives it. And they need to feel that, I think. I don't know. You can't force them, Julie. I realize that, but I wish they'd be a little more involved.
I'm gonna say bye and stop the recording, but I'm not really gonna